Welcome to the Billerica Historical Society's annual meeting. The agenda tonight, which I have to advance, we'll have my report. I'm the president, John Bartlett. Then we'll have Ann Statman give the treasurer's report, Diane Douglas, the secretary's report. We'll have the election of officers. Then we'll have a short break for dessert. Then Matthew Ahern will talk about the Industrial Revolution in Billerica. Actually, before I really start talking, I just want to thank all the society officers and board members for all our efforts this year. During my talk, I'll reference some people have taken on responsibility for different projects, and they've done a great job. They report their status on a monthly basis to our monthly meetings, and the board discusses it, makes recommendations, and we vote to which way we want to go. But everybody has contributed to this past year, this successful year. And COVID hasn't really been a problem this past year. We're having open houses, and we have all our meetings in person. Previously, we did it via Zoom, previous year and a half. Okay. So this is the Clara Sexton House. As I reported last year, we completed the exterior restoration project. That was funded by a $100,000 grant from the Community Preservation Committee, which included repairing and repainting the exterior of the house, restoring all the windows pane by pane, repairing the entrance to the doctor's house on the left side, and adding granite steps to the kitchen. That was a very successful project, and Rich Kanicki led that project for us. And as I talked about last year, we talked about doing something with the barn. And so we did. We started this process. We use the barn for storage right now. That's sort of what it looks like. There's the roof. You can see tools hanging on the side. But it's unheated, and that's basically all we could use it for, was storage. In February, we submitted a proposal to the Community Preservation Committee in town, and they approved our proposal, and then in the spring town meeting, the Billerica Spring Town Meeting, approved it, and we got a grant for $158,000. Jerry Sorensen, a local architect, donated our initial plans for the restoration of the barn. And the barn, what we want to do is to have a climate controls, heated and air conditioned, and have it so we could display artifacts in there that we can't display now because we don't have the room. And there's a loft on the second floor, and let's see, what's the next one? There's a loft on the second floor, and that will be finished too. So we'll be able to use the second floor for some of our larger objects, like we have a sleigh that we've talked about putting up there, and maybe some of the records that we have, file cabinets, but we haven't decided all of that, what's going to be going up there. We have, these are more detailed plans. This is just the floor space of the barn. It's roughly 25 by 25, and we'll have a stairway in the middle, as you can see, that goes to the second floor, to the loft area. And Robert Scott, who's a local contractor, he's our general contractor. And once this is done, we want to have a display area. We need display cases and whatnot. So Mark Lombardo obtained a state grant of $50,000 to be used for purchase of display cases, audio-visual equipment, and any furniture that we may need. And we'll put that in that floor space that you saw so we can display things. We can hold some meetings in there. We hope that that will be done by the spring, but we'll see how things go. Some things are out of our control. As I previously, Mark Lombardo, about 3 years ago, got a $45,000 grant for us. So this is an additional $50,000. That $45,000 was used for many purposes, like making repairs to the Clara Sexton House, buying computers and software, and installing a security system. For the last several months, we've been holding open houses on the first Sunday of each month. And this is where the Minutemen were there for one of our open houses, and people really enjoyed seeing them there. We also had 2 open houses in the spring for the seniors, who it was in the senior newsletter at the Senior Center in Billerica, and they came over from the Senior Center and we gave them tours. In December, we'll have an open house on December 3rd from 4 to 7. That's the day of the Billerica tree lighting, so that's actually a Saturday. We do it the same day, so different than our normal open houses. And there's Dick there, all dressed up in his best, all decked out, yes. And during the winter months of January, February, and March, we won't have any open houses, but we will resume them in April. Okay, during this past year, members gave 2 talks at the Council on Aging, which is the Billerica Senior Center. Thank you, Diane. It's one and the same. So last December, Dick Hawes gave a talk on the Billerica-Bedford Railway, and in April, Tom Tringali gave a talk on the Billerica Minutemen's response to the alarm of April 19th, 1775. And both talks had full capacity audiences and were well received. I know because I went to Dick's talk and I had to sneak in because it was all full.
That's the president talking.
Yeah, no, you got to edit that out. No. I expect we'll be doing more such talks in the future. Okay, last spring we had our first Victorian tea since COVID started. We had it in this building. And Diane Douglas organized that, a successful event. As she has. And people had a good time. And there are some of the people having, oh, that's my wife. I didn't know that was going to happen. So.
Next to her. On either side, but you never noticed her.
Yeah.
You know about the lady who grew up across the street from you? The other lady and everything, but you didn't notice her.
Well, so she's up there because all the time she heard different versions of this talk over the last couple days. Okay. On Billerica Cleanup Green Up Day, like we do every year, we go up to a property that we own at on the Shawshene River where the Middlesex Canal Aqueduct crosses. It's on Route 129 at the Billerica-Wilmington line. And we clean up the area, we cut down all the brush and whatnot. So, and we do that every year. Anybody's welcome to come and help us do that. Okay. So here are Diane and Ann cataloging. And they do this most Friday afternoons. Sometimes other people do it, but they're the ones that really do it. And they're cataloging all our artifacts. And what happens is we have some museum software, past perfect, and all that artifact data is entered into the database with information of such where you obtained the artifact, how it relates to Billerica and the various families, and most important, where do we store this stuff, so we can get it again. This is an ongoing task because people frequently donating papers and photographs and whatnot to the society. So this is an ongoing task. And they're there every Friday afternoon doing that. we couldn't find a photograph, but we have booths at Yankee Doodle. In September, we had a booth, and we had a booth also at the Farmers Market in October. And what we do there is we're trying to spread the word of what the Billerica Historical Society's mission is. People come up, a lot of people know us, a lot of people have never heard of us. But we sell items from our gift shop, and we usually have giveaways to attract people to our table, and it works. Then they give us donations. They give us donations for things they wouldn't have bought. But. Okay, so Yankee Doodle is published every quarter. Diane Douglas is our editor. And Alec Ingram, he contributes many articles, probably most of the articles. And we hope it provides information on what are the Society's activities during the year and during each quarter, and also on the history of Billerica. We have T-shirts, so I got to show you. I got to do, whoops, this is going to be hard. Just give me a moment. No, I have a prop. It's my T-shirt. So we had these T-shirts made up, and on the front they have the insignia of the Historical Society, which has all the founding families. And on the back, it has the names of the 113 people, men, boys, who went to Concord on April 19th, 1775, and fought at Miriam's Corner against the British. So we have teas here today to sell, and I hope you buy a lot. And I've been told that these are good Christmas gifts. So, and birthday, whatever. They're good gifts. They're good gifts. So we found out last year we have a seat on the Billerica Historic Districts Commission. Until last year, our current board as well as the commission, we were unaware, that the society was entitled to a seat. So once we found out, we confirmed it. We nominated 2 candidates for that seat, and Dick Hawes was appointed, and Mary Jones is an alternate. So we will now have a say in what is built or modified in the town's historic districts. Yay. Okay. And I'd like to say Rich Kanicki, he makes repairs and upgrades to the Sexton House all the time, and including this past year, he's installed sensors to detect frozen water pipes, put up new shades in some of the rooms. Those are just a couple of things. But we want to thank him for making all the changes that are necessary for a 300-year-old house. And there's a lot of repairs to it. I also want to acknowledge Elaine Kanicki and Cindy Hawes for the cleaning up of the Clara Sexton House on a regular basis. They make it presentable for all our open houses. They've also straightened up Clara's room on the 2nd floor, and hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to show this room in our tours. Okay? So that's done. So, moving right along. What are some of our plans for the coming year? Well, we expect that the barn restoration will be completed by the end of the winter, and that the museum, the display area, will be ready by late spring. Now, there are some things that are not in our control, but that's sort of the timeline that we're working on. We plan on having a grand opening, hopefully next June. And next year is also the 300th anniversary of when the Clara Sexton House was originally built. So we also will celebrate that milestone with tours and talks about all the people who have lived in the house and when all of the additions and modernizations were made. And we expect that the display area opening in the 300th anniversary of Clara Sexton House will be one event, and we'll look forward to that next June. Lastly, we have a time capsule. And at next year's annual meeting, we plan on opening the time capsule. That will be the 100th anniversary of the time capsule. It was, the Historical Society filled it in 1923. So we'll remove all of the contents. We would have brought it here, except it's heavy. And we're old. Right. So we just took a picture of it, but it's, on the size of it is probably about the size of the chest that they have in the next room over there. But this is welded shut. So we expect to remove all the contents and display many of them in our display area in the barn. And then we'll replace the contents with new contents of what people may want to put in there. Like we have a book over here that you can sign for $5, but you can sign it, that's going in there. But we'll put things in there like the annual town report, some of Yankee Doodle Times magazines, and also a lot of things relating to Billerica. It's quite a large time capsule, so we'll be able to put a lot in there. We do have an idea of some of the contents of what's in the current one. We did find a list. There are a lot of bank books with small initial deposits of like $1 or $2 that have compounded, so maybe they're $10 or $20 now, I don't know. But copy of the bylaws at the time, lots of photos, letters that people wrote, newspapers, the town had a newspaper and magazines, the Town of Billerica annual report, list of all the society members, a book with the names of all the students in the Billerica schools, names of Civil War veterans from Billerica, some of Warring Meanings papers, a telephone directory, and if we can find a telephone directory of Billerica, maybe we'll put one in, and lots of other documents. But we'll reseal it, and it will be opened hopefully in October of 21-23. And if any of you have ideas of what you think we should be placing in there, please get in touch with us and let us know. Or if you have something that you think should be put in there, you know, it's a large capsule, you know, time capsule, large chest. So please get in touch with us, and you know, we'll try to accommodate it. So that concludes my report. Are there any questions that anybody has? That's great. Yes.
Are we going to do the time capsule opening or give them the event?
We're going to do it at next year's annual meeting, and I think it will be on October 23rd, if I remember, on a Friday. And but it will be a Friday instead of a Sunday, because I think that will be exactly 100 years to the day afterwards.
It says right on that brass plaque, it says October 23rd, 2023.
Yeah.
Probably come right back here.
That would be the plan. But yeah, we'll open it then, and everybody can see what's in there. Hopefully we can open it. Rich, this will be Rich's task to figure out how we're going to open it.
Got it all figured out.
Good. Now Diane Douglas will give the secretary's report.
The 125th annual meeting of the Billerica Historical Society took place on Sunday, October 17th at 3:30 p.m. via Zoom. Why do I not remember that? No, it didn't go by via Zoom.
No, it didn't go by.
Yeah, and it had 26 people attended in-person meeting, so never mind. Cancel the Zoom part. Joel Bowie spoke about the bullet-riddled artifacts. This included information about our own bullet-riddled board. President John Bartlett called the annual meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. He shared what had been accomplished over the past year, as well as his hopes for 2022. Secretary Diane Douglas read the minutes of the 2020 annual meeting. The minutes were approved as read. Treasurer Ann Statman presented the treasurer's report. She also presented the budget. The accounting and budget were approved as read. The slate of officers was presented for approval, and the Secretary Diane Douglas cast one vote for the full slate of officers. The officers include President John Bartlett, Vice President Richard Hawes, Treasurer Ann Statman, Secretary Diane Douglas, Director Kathy Burns, Director Alec Ingraham, Director Mary Jones, Director Richard Kanicki, Director Tom Tringali. Respectfully submitted, Diane Douglas, Secretary.
Thanks, Diane. And Diane just reminded me we should have a motion to approve both the treasurer's report and the minutes. So I'll take a motion to, yeah, I want to make a motion to
accept the treasurer's report and the secretary's report.
you a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good. Okay, we'll do the elections now for the offices for the coming year. Did I do? I don't think I have a slide for that. This past year, we had one resignation from the board. Tom Tringali resigned because his work commitments conflicted with our meeting schedules. All the other officers and board members are running for re-election. And the current officers and board members running for re-election are myself, John Bartlett for president, Dick Hawes for vice president, treasurer Ann Statman, secretary Diane Douglas, and the board, Rich Kanicki, Kathy Burns, Alec Ingram, and Mary Jones. Now that leaves one opening on the board, but are there any other nominations? Okay. Okay. Michelle, do we have a second? Okay. Are there any other nominations? So I think we'll just have a motion to vote for the entire slate, because there's no, what we have is one candidate for each position.
Make a motion that you vote for one slate.
Do we have a second? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. So we now have a new slate of officers for the next year. We'll take about a 10-minute break for dessert, and then we'll have Matthew Ahern's talk on the Industrial Revolution in Billerica. There were a couple things I forgot to mention. One is that on the T-shirts, which have been very successful, Mary Jones did all the work in getting those shirts. It was instrumental. Many trips to New Hampshire, getting lost and taking the scenic route. And one other thing that I want to say about the budget and whatnot, we're considering raising the membership dues starting next year. And we haven't raised them. They've been the prices that they are now for a decade or two, I think. And so we're going to raise them. And maybe that will close the gap somewhat. Not all of it, but somewhat the gap between what our income is and what our expenses are. Okay? So I'd like to introduce Matthew Ahern, who will be talking about the Industrial Revolution in Billerica. Matthew received his bachelor's magna cum laude in English and history with minors in American Studies and Medieval and Renaissance Studies from the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. He is currently studying for his master's in history at Salem State with a concentration in public history. His past professional positions include lead interpreter and site manager for the Old Manse in Concord, as well as roles at the Massachusetts Historical Society, Robbins House, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Today, he performs preservation carpentry and masonry. You probably could use it. With the Massachusetts Historic Preservation Corps, while also serving in the Army National Guard as a sergeant in the 972nd Military Police Company. Matthew is a lifelong resident of Billerica with family roots going back to Major John Lane, and I believe that's in around 1700, right? In the Ditson family of Billerica. He currently manages historical collections of the First Congregational Church in Billerica and the Thomas Talbot Masonic Lodge. His other memberships include Phi Alpha Theta, National Honor Society of History, the Sons of the American Revolution, Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War, and the Veterans Association of the First Corps of Cadets. In his spare time, he enjoys wandering around old New England graveyards looking for long-dead ancestors. I can understand that. So, without further ado, here's Matthew.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming to listen to me talk for a little bit about Billerica's industry in the 19th century. I subtitled this talk From the Middlesex Canal to the Talbot Mills, but we go, Middlesex Canal to a little bit beyond the Talbot Mills, talking about the impacts, the social impacts, and the political impacts in Billerica. So this presentation really came about probably around a year ago. I reached out to the Historical Society. I just didn't have enough to do, and I was really interested in helping out some way. And so I connected with Dick, and we were talking about the interests and needs of the society, and he thought it would be a good idea to kind of just do a deep dive into industry in Billerica and the Industrial Revolution. So what this really is a survey of what I was able to kind of see and observe. Hopefully, something here will catch your interest, and we can do more of a deep dive. So I'm hoping to cover a lot of different topics in a relatively short amount of time. So just bear with me on that. Before we begin, though, officially, I wanted to just frame this in my personal family and my family personal experience. So behind these two people is the aqueduct. This photograph was taken 1950, 1960. These are my grandparents. So you have Robert Norman Lane and then Catherine Lucia. So Robert Lane is descendant of Job Lanes, all them. And Catherine Lucia, her mom actually owned the property on the Billerica side of the aqueduct. So Mary Burns Lucia. So for a long time, my family's kind of been in and around this area, and I live right off Bellflower Road and on Larkspur. So this is very close to home. So I see this all the time. But as I was doing more research on the on this topic, I was driving around Billerica and I would see all these signs that I'd never seen before. Like the narrow gauge railroad, or even the Middlesex Canal, like different signs all over the place. And so kind of opened up my eyes to how this is all around us. So this is kind of an agenda, the topics I kind of want to hit. So first I want to talk about demographics, and then transportation technology and how that impacted Billerica, different industry and the rise of different business and how that impacted different parts of Billerica differently. And then also social impacts, mainly looking at religious education, social club things, and then the political impacts. I think towards the end of the 19th century, once Billerica had kind of come into its own as at least North Billerica had as an industrial center, that's really where you really see the rise of individuals like Governor Thomas Talbot and the sort of the political ascendancy of the town. So just here's a quick breakdown of demographics here. So I think this chart is really helpful. So what I basically did was I took the raw census data in Billerica and I just put it into a chart and just was just kind of to observe what the what the line looked like. I was kind of shocked. I had come into this project thinking that the Industrial Revolution, there was going to be a huge boom. It wasn't as much as I thought. So Billerica in 1790s, about 1,200 people. 1900, 2,776 people. So it increased, but not as much as I thought. Compare that to Lowell, which is just north of us, 94,000 people by 1900. So it's still very small at this point. Immigration was a big, key thing that I was interested in to see, where folks were coming from. The population did increase, so that would make sense that, people from different parts of the world would also be coming to Billerica. So by 1880, about a fourth of the population were foreign-born. So the largest are, your Irish, your English, your Canadians, and Scottish. But there's a few other people groups in here. Germans, the Welsh, Swedish, French, Danish, Dutch. I think that was all I was able to find in the census data, at least. So things are definitely, by the end of the 19th century, you got a fourth of people who are foreign-born. So they're really flocking to the industrial center that is North Billerica at this point. So to begin with transportation, I just want to talk a bit about the Middlesex Canal. So the canal was really the brainchild of, I always pronounce his name wrong, Loami Baldwin, and then James Sullivan was a really politically influential figure in the state. He was a former governor. In 1793, they really have this plan to use a canal system to connect Boston to northern Massachusetts and beyond into New Hampshire. And so they get to work making this a reality. This is John Hancock pictured up here. He's the first proprietor. He's for the Middlesex Canal Company, and he dies not too long after. So he never actually gets to see the canal get completed, but he is sort of that link to the the revolution of old. In 1795, the first ground is broken here in Billerica, and there was a sense, I think, when the canal was first being worked on, that Billerica was going to change in a really significant way, and so there was a lot of excitement. The canal gets finished in 1803, and I have here that's 27 miles long, 30 feet wide, and 3 feet deep. And it really was both a commercial, but it was also a private way of transportation as well. So it allowed for both. And this was an incredible piece of technology. I think sometimes that's kind of lost on us because we see the ruins of it. Here is an image of the aqueduct when it would have been in full function. But we just see the ruins today. But it really was an incredible piece of technology and a feat of engineering. But ultimately, and I think innovative failure is probably a bit too harsh on it. I think it did pretty well for quite a long time, but it just didn't have the impact that I think people like Baldwin, who's pictured right here, had hoped for. So so some more stats here. So it cost about $1.1 million, which is over $30 million today to construct, and they really weren't able to, the company wasn't really able to pay out dividends to their backers until 1819 because of all of the alterations and repairs that were necessary to get this thing off the ground. From 1819 to 1843, there is steady success, but there is a growing sense that this thing wasn't, it didn't match the expectations essentially. I have up here an image of Elizabeth Peabody, and Elizabeth Peabody has very little to do with Billerica, except that she was born here in Billerica. Her family came here as part of the wave of people thinking that Billerica was going to become this boom town, and they were gone within a decade. They had moved away because they had realized that the canal wasn't going to turn Billerica into this I guess cosmopolitan center that they had hoped. So she was actually baptized over at First Parish, but beyond that, she doesn't have much of a connection to Billerica. But she's a fascinating individual. I recommend if you don't know much about her. She's really interesting. In 1844 to 51, though, the canal started a slow decline. It wasn't able to really meet with costs. And one of the interesting things that I had found out, particularly I went to the Middlesex Canal Museum, was that the canal actually helped to build the thing that would replace it, the railroads. And so it kind of put itself out of business there. In 1851, the charter was surrendered, and eventually the land was piecemeal sold off to different people. And this will come into play in a very key way up in North Billerica with the Talbot Mills once they come into, once the Talbot brothers come into town. Here's another piece of transportation technology that I think is so fascinating and such a blip on the radar in terms of Billerica history. But yeah, really interesting technology here. So you have the Billerica and Bedford's narrow gauge railroad. So I think due to the failures of the Middlesex Canal, at least this is my interpretation of it, due to the failures of the canal and really a resistance to, by the rest of Billerica, because at this point North Billerica was, pretty well established, but the rest of Billerica was kind of resistant to this potential industrialization. And I think part of that, one of the things I think about is potentially, they saw Lowell as one example. They saw Concord as another example. Concord, had a railroad growing through it, but it also had a large transcendentalist community that really rejected a lot of this technology and industrialization. And so they might have been, the residents of Billerica in some way might have been, sympathetic to that view, and have wanted to keep Billerica, how it was. But eventually, in the 1870s, they were able to convince our residents that maybe a railroad would work out, and so they got to work building a narrow gauge railroad. There was only really one other example of this in the world, and it was in Wales. And when they completed it, it was considered to be a huge feat of engineering. Scientific American actually featured it in an article, but unfortunately, the backers and the supporters, financial supporters of this project turned out to be financially unsound, and it was estimated $50,000 to $60,000 to build, and it just totally fell apart within less than a year. So they shut down the railroad. The two locomotives, which I have pictured here, I think that's Ariel over there, and you have Puck here. They were actually sent up to Maine, where they had much more successful careers as locomotives. Then you have the Faulkner Mills. I haven't done a lot of work with the Faulkner Mills, but I do want to mention them because they are a precursor to the Talbot Mills. They were established around 1811 by Francis Faulkner, who was from Acton. They're the second wool manufacturer in New England. I believe the first one's over in Andover. And they had an interesting agreement because when they were established, the Talbot Mills were established at the end of the canal system, but the Faulkner Mills were established really during what would ultimately become the peak. And so they actually worked with the canal, and they had rights to use the canal at certain points, certain times at certain water levels, things like that. By the late 1800s, you have about 72 workers making about $2,500. That's their total monthly payroll for these 72 workers. Talbot Mills, this is I think was the much larger and more substantial and ultimately more impactful of the two mill systems. So the area that the Talbot Mills was on, or is on, was a part of the Osgood grist mill and the Osgood land grant. And so this was a grist mill that was established in the early 1700s, and it was purchased by the Middlesex Canal Company during its initial planning phases and as they were getting ready to make the canal. And then, as the canal is in its declining years, that's when Charles and Thomas Talbot come to Billerica. So Charles and Thomas are really, in a lot of ways, they are like like a quintessential American dream kind of a pair. The two of them are born in, pretty much, maybe not abject poverty, but they were pretty poor growing up. Thomas, for example, didn't have a real kind of formal education, and they actually worked in mills as mill workers early on. They slowly worked their way up. Charles was the first to come to Billerica and would really get to work really establishing what would become the Talbot Mills. Thomas would join him not too long after. Thomas Talbot would be the more politically famous and important of the two, but the two of them really worked hand in hand throughout their time at the mills. So I have here, so they bought the land from the canals, after they had made a brief agreement to use the land, and then they bought it outright in 1851. Two separate productions were going on at the Talbot Mills. So you had the dyes and the chemicals, as well as the textile work, which that one was really established in 1857. They had, and then by 1864, they had gotten so the grist mill was, from my understanding, was protected by the town, and the Talbot brothers were able to convince the town to get rid of the grist mill, and so they could make way for a water power plant that would, ultimately be a benefit to the town and their production. So that's kind of like 1864 is when they're up and they're full speed ahead, going forward. So for the Talbot Mills, for the workers, the Talbot workers had really, some of the best conditions, in all of the mills in the area. The Talbot Mills were not only the largest employer in Billerica, but they were largely considered to be the best employer in town, especially for some of these, immigrant mill workers. They had, relatively good housing, and they honestly had owners like Charles and Thomas who cared about their well-being. They did things like establish and pay for the establishment of the North Billerica Baptist Church, because they realized that a lot of these immigrants that were coming in were Baptist, even though I'm not sure about Charles's religious leanings, but Thomas was a Unitarian. They made way for them to have a church right by their place of employment, and kind of gave them their own little community up there. And the two brothers did work together, from my understanding, quite well. Charles really handled the dye and chemical processing, while Thomas, dealt with manufacturing. In this area, the workers at the mills, had a pretty, relatively speaking, it wasn't perfect, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this will come up in a major way during Thomas Talbot's political career, the way he treated his workers, and that would ultimately give him the victory in 1878. I also wanted to touch on the dam a little bit, which has been probably has some renewed interest in it, given some of the latest discussions. The site of this dam, originally there was a dam put in around 1711, and it was both a power supply and a system of fire protection. And it was constantly being torn down and restored. I'm not sure exactly how many iterations it went through. But in 1828, the modern dam that we see really starts to take form. What I found so interesting is this is a structure that is being talked about today, but it was a structure that had been talked about quite frequently throughout its history. It was seen as the cause of upstream flooding as far out as Sudbury. And there were some calls to remove the dam. Thomas Talbot and the other owners of the Talbot Mills recognized that if this dam was removed, then this would cause serious disruptions for most of Billerica's economy at this point. And so Talbot, this was one of his reasons for entering politics in the first place, was to protect this dam. Another one was Boston had this idea of rerouting some of the rivers that would interfere with the mills as well, and so that was actually his launching point into state politics, was because of issues like this. Just a couple more notes about some more industry. So you have you have a leather manufacturer, which was established in the 1830s. I want to figure out more about this. This was really just a footnote. I believe it was a footnote in Hazen's book about a Samuel Parker who established a machine for splitting leather and had patented it. I want to know what that looks like and what that method, what that was. But I haven't been able to find it yet. But Jonathan Hill would really utilize this. He would use machines like this for leather manufacture, and they made a decent annual income, $28,000 annually by 1875. You have the cabinet makers, Deacon Aaron Patton, who was a deacon at First Congregational Church in Billerica, had purchased a saw and grist mill from Theophilus Manning and had established a business. It seems like he sat on it for a little bit, but in 1845 he started to open up this cabinet making business, and it did quite well for himself. He eventually, he passed it on, I believe, to his sons, and then his sons sold it, and then the site burned down in the 1880s. So it's no longer there, but he did well while he was in charge of it. And then you have the glue factory, which was established by the Middlesex Turnpike in 1867, and started off as a smaller operation, but then grew much larger. And then I have some other statistics that I was able to find from census data. And one of the things I noted that you have about 200 members of the 200 workers at the Talbot Mills, making about $7,000 monthly, for the total of the workers monthly. And if you look at total wages paid, you got about 110,000, which probably means that most of the wages being paid out are from the Talbot Mills. So they are a huge entity in the town. So it wasn't all great. There were some pretty bad things happening in town. I don't know how frequent this was, but it's probably pretty expected if in these industrial areas that there were, some industrial accidents and deaths. I got some newspaper clippings that talk about some of these deaths, being crushed. Had one of his arms caught in the machinery. You also had some examples of, and these were reported, examples of suicide from the workers who were working in these mills. Particularly later on, in the very end of the 1800s, I think it was 1898, 1899, there was a huge strike of the Talbot Mill workers, and that was the first time a strike had ever been done in that mill, and it was seen as a really, really big deal. You also have, substance abuse and alcoholism. This up here is a really interesting piece that we have over at First Congregational Church. It's called the Comprehensive Pledge, and it was signed by all members of this organization known as Band of Hope, which was a youth organization that was looking to sort of prevent substance abuse. It was a temperance organization, and it was they're trying to educate children on the dangers of alcoholism and tobacco and swearing and things like that. And in this pledge, the pledge, I think it was Henry M. Jenkins, who was 18 at the time when he signed this, had to pledge that he wasn't going to not drink, not smoke tobacco, not use foul language. And this organization that was run and spearheaded by J.G.D. Stearns over at First Congregational had about 200 members. So in the 1850s. So that kind of gives you a sense of, and these were all kids, and so gives you a sense of how important this was at the time. So you have some social impacts I wanted to touch on. So you've got a ton of churches popping up. So by the start of the 1800s, there's one church. Everyone goes to the same church. It's the meeting house. By the end of the 19th century, you have I believe a dozen. I think you have First Parish, you have First Congregational, you have the Baptist Church, North Billerica Baptist, Catholic, and I believe Episcopalian at this point too. So I might have got one of those mixed up, but you have about 6, and there's more to come as well. Education too. Education before this century was sporadic, and the only time you would get higher education was if your family was of some means. You had Pemberton Academy, the Billerica Academy, the Sabbath School, which was ran out of First Congregational Church. Actually, for a long period, was the only school in town. That shut down, and then the house school was established in the 1850s, and that would become like the first public school. It wasn't public but there was an endowment that allowed for Billerica children to go there, at no cost for a little while. I think they had to start charging at some point, but then public schools were mandated by the state. So for a while, it was like a free option. And then you have, the proliferation of social clubs. Two of the ones I know off the top of my head are the Oddfellows in the Shawsheen Lodge, and then Thomas Talbot. One of the really interesting things about Thomas Talbot Lodge was these are the charter officers here. Almost all of them are heavily involved in North Billerica industry. The first worshipful master of Thomas Talbot Lodge is this guy right here, Charles Colerush, and I believe it's his brother, Matthew Colerush, is right there. So these guys are very involved in the North Billerica industry. They actually create this lodge because they're going to lodges in Lowell, but they realize we have enough guys to form our own lodges, so they form a lodge, and they actually meet up in the attic of North Billerica Baptist. Is their first couple of meetings is up there. So the last thing subject I wanted to just touch on was the political impacts of the Industrial Revolution here. So this is Governor Talbot right here. He was involved in state politics starting in the 1860s. He was in the state legislature. He then became lieutenant governor for a little bit, and then acting governor when the governor stepped out of office. I believe he accepted a federal position, and so he left. Talbot was seen as somewhat of a cursed individual. After his first stint in office, he vetoed. He was a large temperance advocate, and vetoed an alcohol bill that would have made alcohol purchasing and usage more liberal. He vetoed that, and after that, he was kind of for a while he was blackballed from higher office. But he came back in a pretty strong way during the election of 1878. This was a really interesting election too, because you have Talbot from North Billerica, and his competitor or his opponent was Benjamin Butler from Lowell. So for that 1 year in that election, it was Billerica versus Lowell, factory owner versus factory owner, and a lot of it was based on the reputation of these individuals as owners. And when you were comparing that, there wasn't much of a comparison. Talbot was known as somebody who treated his workers really well, someone who gave his workers good conditions. Butler, not so much. And so it was a really interesting race because in a lot of ways, Talbot was the dark horse because he had been kind of blackballed for a little while. And Butler was a Civil War general. He was, very well known. He also was a guy who had some, national ambitions. But Talbot won, kind of an upset as well. His slogan was right up here, and this is a pretty common slogan for politicians of the time: "Honest money, honest men," and that was in reference to he was an anti-greenbacker, so he believed in maintaining the gold standard and things like that. But he was also he would be considered a progressive Republican. He believed in labor reform, early advocate of women's suffrage, prison reform, and temperance. Obviously, he continued that to the end of his days. So, in a lot of ways, I think Talbot's work in the mills actually got him up to that position where he was in the State House. So I just have some final observations, and then I do welcome questions. I can't promise that I'll be able to answer all of them or any of them, but I'd be happy to take them in and do more research on. So some final observations. So I see North Billerica as being really an industrial vanguard for the town. It's where a lot of the new projects and the new innovations are being developed, and it works, and it's an interesting middle ground between the behemoth that is Lowell and then the small backwoods that is the rest of Billerica, and so it's able to exist in that really interesting space. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the rest of Billerica is a little bit more resistant to this change. And I think it's well founded. I think that they in the past they had been burned by the Middlesex Canal and then the narrow gauge railroad, and they might have really been sympathetic to the transcendentalist thought coming out of places like Concord, and to maintain maintain the communities that they have, and not let industry sort of run rampant all over them. So I think it's interesting to think about and speculate. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but that's where I have leaned. And I think that you see a slight uptick in population, but immigration really does seem to take off at this point. You have a lot of immigrants coming into the town, especially per capita, for sure. And that really adds to this religious diversity and better education, and new ways of interacting and engaging with your members of your community through social clubs. And all of this really helps Billerica to become a really politically influential town, especially in the 1870s. That's when it really hits its zenith. And I think that if you look at Talbot's platform as a governor, a lot of that can be seen through his work as a mill owner. I think his platform is really informed by his experience in the mills and seeing what's wrong with employer and worker relationships around him, and he's trying to make something different statewide and making some policy because of that. So again, all these are kind of just observations, and you can agree or disagree with any of them, but I thank you guys for listening to me ramble on for a little bit, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure on where that was. I think Alec, we were talking about it possibly being near the Tewksbury line, but
what were you talking about? What was your question? The glue factory was up here, right where
Concord Road.
Turnpike and Concord Road.
Yeah.
That intersection.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
beyond it, the section that was discontinued was sort of an entrance to the glue factory at one time.
Is that where the Jake with Adams house was?
Yeah, Jake. They changed the entrance later on and lowered it down.
Yeah. They were from New York. Yeah. So they were, I forget exactly what town they were in, but Talbot had, he had several brothers and sisters, and they all kind of went different areas. I know he has one brother who's buried in Texas, and he's, those two stuck together for a little bit. And yeah, they kind of worked their way up, and they were middle management for a little while, and then they really set out with the Talbot Mills to establish themselves, and they got lucky, and they were also really good at what they did, which I think is evident. Yeah. I think part of it was they saw the boom in Lowell, and I think so for example, I know Charles got more involved up in Lowell, so he kind of went that route, although he stayed with the North Billerica Talbot Mills, but I think they saw that as an entry point to be in that space, kind of. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know about Charles. He probably did, but Thomas Talbot had a large, he had a decently large estate that he had, yeah, here in Billerica. They're both, I believe, both buried in Lowell. I know Thomas is, yeah.
Yeah, you said in the Mills area, rest of the Republic, how it was.
Yeah.
The rest of Billerica was different. How did that affect Billerica politics?
Well, I know that, so locally, I think you do have in that generation right after Talbot, you have a lot of the North Billerica industry workers like Coal Rush, who are very involved in Billerica, proper politics. I think he was town moderator for a very, very long time. So they do trickle in quite a bit. I don't know exactly what kind of potential, labor reforms were enacted or hoped to be enacted here in Billerica because of that experience up in the industrial North Billerica. But you definitely have people trickling in down from North Billerica into the rest of Billerica for sure. Thank you.